Final Fantasy 16 review.
Before we begin, a quick note about spoilers.
Oh,
I'm going
okay.
to do my best to keep this review spoiler-free by mostly showing gameplay from the first third or so of the campaign, but some mechanics and talking points I will be going over don't appear till much later.
I think this is fine. Yeah, I think this is fine. Like, I mean, you're gonna see people talking about the game. I mean, we're gonna play the game in like an hour. Like, what the fuck are we doing? Let's just watch it.
All stuff that will be familiar to you if you've watched the Final Fantasy 16 focused state of play, but if you'd like to go in entirely fresh, you can leave knowing that Final Fantasy 16 is one of my favorites in the series to date. Okay, you've been spoiler warned. Now, on with the review. Even with 16 mainline entries, 20 if you include X2, 13.2, Lightning Returns, and Final Fantasy VII Remake, and a slew of spin-offs, there's no Final Fantasy game quite like Final Fantasy 16. The latest...
Well, it's the first one they've ever done that has action combat. I feel like that, I mean, besides 14, which is an online game, I feel like that's a big fucking deal.
In this legendary series is more an evolution of the character action genre than the RPG foundation that the franchise was built on. It merges quick, twitch reflexes with character building RPG mechanics, but focuses far more on the former than ever before. And look, it's not a perfect mixture. While the combat is phenomenal for an action RPG, it is admittedly lacking when compared directly to the greats of the character action genre. But even an imperfect mix is potent enough. When paired with FF16's...
I think to characterize it into... It was almost reminded me of Tom Cruise for a second. But anyway, fucking, like, it doesn't really require twitch reflexes because you have all of these items that make it easier to play the game. So, like, if you don't want to play it like that, you don't have to.
Epic 50-plus hour story. It's packed with unforgettable characters, outstanding world building, an incredible soundtrack, and knock your socks off moments of sheer spectacle, the likes of which are rarely seen in any game. Final Fantasy XVI picks up the ball that FF14 got rolling and continues to move the series back down the path of high fantasy, taking more than a little inspiration from Game of Thrones along the way. Its stories...
Yeah, I heard that Clive's parents are cousins, so I guess they got that from Game of Thrones.
It's decades worth of history in the realm of Valistia, a land brimming with both beauty and death as an encroaching blight forces neighboring kingdoms to fight over untainted resources, including 5 enormous mother crystals that are the primary source of the realm's magic. At the heart of this tale is your character, Clive Rossfield, the eldest prince of the kingdom of Versaria and protector of his brother Joshua, the dominant of Phoenix. And if you don't know what that is, don't worry, we'll get to it later, but let's not get bogged down in jargon for now. Clive is a fantastic, well-rounded protagonist, brilliantly brought to life by actor Ben Starr. He undergoes a lot of change and development over the course of the decades-long story, but always remains supremely likable, relatable, and an absolute badass when the need arises, as it very often does.
We've played your games.
Yeah, we saw this.
Where he is.
The rest of the cast is fantastic as well. Jill, played by the excellent Susanna Fielding, is Clive's childhood friend and acts as a wonderful companion that understands and empathizes with Clive on a deep and emotional level, and the tender scenes between them are always a highlight as their relationship grows. Sid is probably my new all-time favorite Final Fantasy character.
What trouble are you looking to get yourself into now?
The best kind.
He's got an almost young Liam Neeson vibe going on, despite being voiced impeccably by Ralph Ineson, who's having quite a 2023 in the world of video games.
Yep, that's Loras. There he is.
Then at least have the decency to join me for supper.
Sid is a natural
leader, so good as that
full
character.
of charisma and charm. And without going into detail, his cause is one that's very easy to rally behind and made me excited to follow him and his band of outlaws. The greatest achievement of Final Fantasy XVI's story, though, is how it never leaves you to drown in its lore. This is a massive world complete with 5 kingdoms.
Wait, there's a scene
each
where
with their
she's
own
naked?
forms of government, rulers, religions, and ideals.
Holy
A
shit.
whole encyclopedia's worth of realm-specific terms like bearers, icons, and dominance, and a grand history of the world that you're expected to keep up with if you want to get the most out of the big story beats. it would all be a little overwhelming.
And they got us. Oh, he's probably gonna talk about this
if
now.
not for an ingenious quality of life feature that I truly hope becomes
Yeah.
standard throughout all story-heavy video games: active time lore. At any point during any main story cutscene or conversation, you can hold down the DualSense touchpad to bring up a series of contextual compendium entries that are relevant to what's going on in that scene. So,
Yeah, I thought this was Netflix, but apparently it was Amazon Prime that does this. And like, I've watched movies on Amazon Prime and series, and it's actually so good.
anytime a character mentioned a term, character, or location that I either didn't know about or needed a reminder about,
This PS5 only? Yeah, it is.
I could bring up the active time lore, and a succinct entry would be right there to get me up to speed. These entries change with the events of the story too, updating with new information about the state of the world and Clive's knowledge about it as it happens. Having this kind of feature was a godsend. Later on, big missions are also preceded with stylish history lessons by your crew's scholar that fill you in on what you need to know about the region you're about to visit, who the rulers are, their ambitions, their allies, their enemies, and so on. I know that might sound like school, but it actually did a really effective job of bringing me into and keeping me invested in the realm of Valistia.
Yeah, I think just letting people pause and like see what the hell's going on is super useful.
One of the most interesting elements of the story, and one that also ends up being an awesome addition to the already excellent combat, is the existence of icons and dominants. Icons are supremely powerful beings that Final Fantasy fans will recognize as the usual summons from previous games.
Yeah.
And dominants are the special humans who are able to tap into their power, even to the point of fully transforming into them. Dominants are so powerful that they're almost used like nuclear deterrents, saved as a last resort due to the potential mutually assured destruction that would be caused by their fights. But fight they will, and every time they do, it's an unforgettable scrap of gargantuan proportion. I'd be remiss to spoil these encounters by talking too much about them, but I will say they're absolute spectacles. Some are like giant kaiju fights mixed in with Dragon Ball Z. Others take the gameplay in a completely different direction and play out like a Panzer Dragoon level. But nearly all of them brought back memories of
we
playing
did this
Asura's
part.
Wrath or God of War 3, and that feeling of just being absolutely floored by the breathtaking sense of scale and overwhelming power.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest fucking things is seeing one of those things as a cutscene, then they just turn on the UI and say, alright, here you go, here's the next level. Like, the way it's done is so incredible, man.
Final Fantasy has been shifting further and further away from its turn-based RPG roots for a long time now, and with Final Fantasy XVI, it feels like a metamorphosis that has been in the works for years is finally complete. Final Fantasy XVI...
Because you've also got to keep in mind, like, one of the most popular games for Final Fantasy, like, what are the two most popular games right now for Final Fantasy, like, what I say, is the Final Fantasy VII Remake that has action combat, right? And also 14, that's also action combat. Yeah, it's 7 and 14. So, guess what? They're going to make this one action combat because that's where their audience is gravitated towards.
Combat is a straight-up action game. Full stop. It's fast, flexible, extremely reflex-driven, and is full of opportunities to absolutely style on your enemies with air combos, jump cancels, and a huge arsenal of extremely powerful spells and abilities.
Yep.
Some sacrifices are made to facilitate this transformation. You only ever control one character. Levels are far more linear than they've been in the past, and many of the actual RPG elements have been made to play second fiddle in ways I'll discuss shortly. Purists might not be a fan of these drastic changes, but I found this approach far more preferable to FF15's more hybrid take on combat, and equally enjoyable to FF7 Remake's unique take. Despite how chaotic...
I mean, I would say that, like, I personally prefer action combat. I mean, I've played, like, turn-based games before. It's not like I don't play turn-based games. I played fucking Honkai Star Rail. Well, I guess it's not really turn-based because you just have autoplay on all the time. You don't even play the game at all. But, you know, theoretically, it's turn-based.
The action may look, it's actually elegantly simple once you break it down.
Yeah.
Clive can execute a 4-hit melee combo by mashing square, he can shoot magic with triangle to hit enemies at a distance, he can use an ability unique to whatever icon power he currently has equipped.
He can use two abilities, I think.
and he also has access to up to 2 abilities from that icon as well.
Yeah.
In familiar Final Fantasy fashion, for bigger enemies and bosses, there's a stagger meter that you can fill by landing attacks, and once it's full, they can be put into a staggered state, giving you an opportunity to build up a multiplier and lay down huge amounts of damage for a limited amount of time. Much of the skill involved with combat comes from your ability to quickly stagger enemies and then maximize the amount of damage you're able to do while they're staggered by optimally using your skills and switching between your icons. To that end, there's a lot of smart mechanics in place that reward skillful play. If you just mash the attack button, you won't build up stagger very quickly. But if you use carefully timed magic attacks in between your melee attacks, you'll execute magic bursts, which do more damage and build more stagger.
I didn't know that. I just mashed. I don't think I even died. Ever. Yeah, it wasn't that bad. You just hit him.
On top of that, perfectly timed evasions give opportunity for counterattacks that
Yeah, the perfect evades and the parries are really good in this game.
deal big stagger damage, or if you're feeling extra fancy, you could try to time an attack to clash with theirs to trigger a parry, which slows down time and allows for even more punishment.
Yeah, I don't know how that works.
It's a great combat system that kept my brain firing at a rapid pace as I balanced timing my magic bursts with managing my skill cooldowns and keeping an eye out for enemy tells to be ready to dodge.
I feel like I'm probably not going to have to learn parry until we go into the hard mode.
Top of just trying to look cool for the sake of looking cool, which is always an important element of any action game in my book. One of my favorite touches is that you can issue commands to your Hound Torgal, one of which will launch weaker enemies, allowing me to zip right to them in the air, juggle them with some quick aerial hits, and then send them
that's
crashing back down
100%
with an
Devil May Cry.
explosive Helm Splitter style attack.
Even I remember
All
that from Devil May Cry 3.
This is a long game, and while you do pretty regularly get new icons and abilities, they don't change up combat in ways that make the basic fights substantially different or more engaging, which means they do eventually lose some of their luster. That isn't helped by lots of recycled enemy types in the open fields and linear dungeons that you explore either.
I don't really mind about that too much because, like, for example, the way you fight, like, personally, the way I fought Godric in Elden Ring is pretty much the same way that I fought Radagon and the Elden Beast. Well, first you jump and then you attack, and then after you do that, you jump again and then you attack again. And that's about it. So that's fine with me. It doesn't bother me. The mob reskins and everything, I don't think it's... I haven't played enough of the game to, like, have an opinion on it. Personally, I think it's really cool to see, like, the same mobs from Final Fantasy XIV in this game, since it gives, like, an updated, it's a visualization of, like, what they are trying to make them look like.
At least the bosses were always fresh and exciting, with many playing with some fun Final Fantasy tropes, like having the names of big attacks show up on screen, and some exceptionally dangerous techniques, even having a countdown that ends with an extremely powerful blow if you're unable to do enough damage to stop them from getting it off. Many of the bigger boss battles also have QTEs that do a wonderful job of adding extra cinematic flair and punctuate the different phases of a fight with some truly awesome moments.
Yeah, the quick time events, it's like, obviously this shit is kind of a joke. I remember, like, God of War was the first game that I played that had this, but I mean, it some people, like, shit on it. I think it's fine.
Take a beating.
As touched upon earlier, the weird twist of Final Fantasy XVI is that while the action elements are all top-notch, the RPG elements are a little underdeveloped. Loot seems like an afterthought. I never once felt incentivized to explore either the corners of the linear main levels or the open fields of the interconnected overworlds. And in general, there just aren't a ton of character building choices that you can make to customize Clive in any sort of unique way. The deepest it gets is that you can equip Clive with up to 3 accessories that can have a variety of useful effects, usually powering up specific special abilities, increasing your combo damage, or increasing healing potency. You also begin with a total of 5 special rings that are designed to take some of the edge off of combat in lieu of lower difficulty modes. One essentially lets you mash square and let the AI take the wheel as it automatically casts spells, switches icons, and uses basic attacks.
The
While
Honkai
another
Star Rail
will
mode.
automatically dodge as long as an attack is capable of being avoided. While I personally didn't feel the need to use these rings, I do appreciate their inclusion as a completely optional way to adjust the difficulty in very specific ways. Of course, the downside
Yeah, I think the rings are a good idea too.
is that if you do equip them, you won't have the space for other stat-altering accessories, thus removing the one element of RPG-like customization altogether. But where Final Fantasy XVI really impressed me was in the quality of its side quests. Well, eventually. They actually start out pretty generic and menial, with objectives like finding X number of Y items out in the field, or delivering 3 hot bowls of soup to people in the hideout. However, in the back half of the story, these side quests act as smart ways to button up all the loose threads outside of the main campaign. Side characters are given proper send-offs, pieces that were toppled over in the central story are satisfyingly built back up, and characters that you wouldn't really expect to have very deep backstories open up to you in often very moving ways. It's exactly the kind of side content that I want in a big RPG, even though it takes a little while to get there. In addition to side quests, there's also a bounty board that you can use to locate exceptionally challenging monsters for some greater rewards.
See, this is what I'm really excited to be able to do. I think this is really cool. I like this a lot in Star Wars too.
Many of them are just stronger versions of enemies that you've already fought, but others are boss encounters unto themselves and make up some of the hardest fights available. All things considered, there's a fair amount of extra content here to keep you busy, and you'll want to do as much of it as you can to be ready for New Game Plus, which significantly ups both the challenge and the level cap, and introduces new gear upgrades. Even beyond that, there's also an arcade mode that you can use to go through previous levels and try to set high scores to upload to an online leaderboard. Needless to say, there's a lot to do even once the credits finish rolling. And oh my god, the soundtrack by Bahamut's Grace, the soundtrack.
The prince is with us!
It manages to perfectly accompany every big scene, whether it's the tender moments between Clive and Jill, the quiet moments of respite inside the hideaway, or the absolutely epic battles between icons.
I think that, like, I mean, the music is fucking insane. I mean, like, again, like, the guy that did Final Fantasy XIV's music, I think, is doing the music in this one, too. It's Soken. So, like, I mean, obviously, it's gonna be really good. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm ready to claim it in the top Final Fantasy soundtracks of all time.
I mean, I don't think any of this is a spoiler. But it's certainly
one of the best soundtracks of 2023.
Like, all of this has been in the other preview materials.
Final Fantasy XVI looks stunning too. The performance may not hold on to a consistent 60 FPS all the time, even on the prioritized frame rate graphical setting, but those minor hiccups don't stop it from still being one of the most gorgeous games I've ever played.
Yeah, it looks really nice.
Final Fantasy XVI will likely be looked back upon as a turning point for the mainline Final Fantasy games.
Yeah, I think so.
Taking its combat fully in the direction of an action game. But I hope that conversation doesn't overshadow its dark and captivating tale, its memorable characters, and the innovative ways in which it helps you keep track of it all. The active time lore feature is incredible, and should be standard for all story-driven games going forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like that might be one of the features that, like, now after Final Fantasy has added this, everybody else wants to see it too.
The combat may not live up to the sky-high standards as some of the best games in the character action genre. Among other action RPGs, it's near the top of the heap. Pair all of that with one of the best soundtracks of the year, incredible performances from top to bottom, and drop-dead gorgeous visuals, and you've got a game worthy of an orchestral Final Fantasy victory fanfare.
It's a 9, alright. As I said, I think that Final Fantasy... I think this game is going to win Game of the Year.
For more Final Fantasy 16, make sure to check out the first minutes of the game.
I feel pretty confident that that's going to happen.
Keep it here on IGN.
I feel like it's either going to be that or Tears of the Kingdom, but I think it's going to be Final Fantasy. Personally, I think so. Zelda exists, no chance with Starfield. I mean, like, maybe Starfield's going to be really good. Yeah, you're right. I don't know. I just, personally, I feel like Final Fantasy will win, but you're right. Starfield's kind of, like, I'll be honest, before I watched the review about Starfield, I was, like, pretty much out on Starfield. I was like, this is just going to be, you know, one of those overproduced AAA duds. But whenever we watched the Starfield Direct thing on the Xbox, fucking whatever it was, I was really impressed. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I was actually very impressed by how good everything that I saw from Starfield was. Like, it won me over in a way that I never had expected. I think this is a decent review. I mean, a 9 out of 10. I will have to see. I'll tell you that, like, for the demo, I would have ranked the demo a 10 out of 10. Like, from just what I saw from the demo, I think 10 out of 10. And also, like, on a personal level, like, I'm going to want to play through it on the hard mode because that's the kind of, you know, gamer I am. And I like to get mad at the game and then fucking hate myself over it. You know, it's like a whole thing. So, like, whenever I do that, obviously, you know, like, that's, like, more content for me. So it's like I get to play through the game twice, effectively. So, yeah. But I do think, basically, because publishers don't give us demos like that anymore. Well, yeah, I mean, that's true. And it's like publishers that do give you demos, they end the demo right at the fucking climax. But, like, with the demo of Final Fantasy 16, they gave you the climax, and they were like, okay, there you go. But, yeah, either way, this is a good review, I think, is fair. I can see... I haven't played, like, the new Bayonetta or Devil May Cry games, so it's really hard for me to have a frame of reference of, like, how good is Final Fantasy 16 versus those games, which are the main games that it's kind of competing against.